So just a reminder, I'm going to call the roll tonight, and then once the meeting... And we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. Hard to believe that July is about half over already. This is a remote meeting due to COVID-19 and the coronavirus emergency. So welcome to anyone that is watching the live broadcast. It's available on TV 21. We are also live on Facebook. And then we have our YouTube Kent TV 21 channel. So looking at the agenda, Kim, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Council President Troutner. Council President Troutner?
Here.
Councilmember Boyce?
Here.
Councilmember Fincher?
Here.
Councilmember Kaur? Councilmember Larmer?
Here.
Councilmember Michaud?
Here.
Councilmember Thomas?
Here.
And I have noted that Mayor Ralph is in attendance. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Moving on in the agenda, are there any changes from council or staff? And I haven't heard of any today, so we are going to move forward with department presentations. We have quite a few, but I think we will get through some of these fairly quickly. We will start with the first presentation, which is Community Development Block Grant Budget Adjustment. And I'd like to welcome Dinah Wilson.
Thank you. Good evening or afternoon, everyone. I am presenting a budget adjustment to the Community Development Block Grant budget, the 2019 budget. And it is to ask you to authorize the mayor to adjust the budget to accept $670,541 in CARES Act funds for coronavirus relief in our city. These funds were authorized through a bill that was passed by the U.S. Congress on March 27th, and the funds are to be used to prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. We substantially amended our action plan to receive these funds, and our Human Services Commission will entertain a motion to accept that amendment on this Thursday. We will use the funds for, at least the priority for the funds are listed in the memo that I submitted to you. It seems that the most needed thing in our community right now is assistance for rent and food, and also homeless services. So we will be deciding on that as well. Those funds, how to use them on this Thursday. So that's the amendment. Any questions, anyone?
Great, thank you so much. Any questions or comments from any of my colleagues? Councilmember Larmer, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, just a comment. I just personally would like to see us prioritize the rental assistance, because I think we're going to be looking at a big explosion of that in the coming months as the moratoriums expire. So that would just a comment there, that's my preference to see it used for that.
Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to echo what Councilmember Larmer said. We definitely will be seeing our community struggling. So I would definitely like to see us focusing on rental housing assistance as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fincher, you have your mic off. Do you have a comment or a question?
Oh, thank you. I'm just going to join in on that same thing. I was on a call earlier today, and even though people are not supposed to be able to be evicted during this time, not until August 1st, there's already seems to be a rash of people who have got notices that they will be evicted after that. So yeah, help is definitely needed. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, great comments from my colleagues. And I'm guessing I support receiving this and authorizing this. Any other objections from council to move this forward to the consent calendar? All right, wonderful. Thank you for the presentation, and we will move on in the agenda. It looks like we have King County Flood Control District Cooperative Watershed Management Grant. And Melissa, welcome.
Hello, council members, Council President Troutner, Mayor Ralph. Thank you for having me here this afternoon, this sunny afternoon. I'm Melissa Dahl, and I'm an environmental engineer here in Public Works. And, I'm excited to be here on behalf of a recent grant that the city was awarded for the Downey Farmstead Restoration Project. Just want to kick things off by showing you the images that we have on the screen right now. The picture in the left is probably pretty familiar if you drive on 516. That's an image of what the project site currently looks like. We've made a lot of progress on it, but the image on the right is actually a recent artist rendering that we had completed that will show kind of the same perspective. So it should go from looking like what it currently does to pretty nice habitat on the right. So moving ahead to the next slide. Thank you, Kim. So I know it's been a little while since I last provided you guys with an update, so I'm just going to reiterate probably some information that you've probably heard a few times from me. The Downey project has made significant progress since we started back in 2018. We've actually cleared and grubbed a 22-acre site. Site was originally a tree farm, so we actually made a point to salvage the trees that were on site or to mulch them. And if you look on the image on the right, you can actually see the piles of mulch and logs that we've stockpiled for future phases. We've removed about 110 cubic yards of material, a significant amount. We've relocated Frega Road, where it previously was up against the river. Now it's closer to 516. We've also built a pedestrian and cyclist trail that we couldn't have done without the support of our Parks Department. And we've also removed some arsenic contamination from the site. So we've made a lot of significant progress on the project, and the images you see on the screen are images of that progress. But moving ahead to the next slide, there's still a lot of work left to complete. We have to remove the remaining material from the site, about another 100,000 cubic yards. So we're probably about halfway through the excavation. We've got to place about 50 habitat structures, so log structures. We really have to plant about 30,000 native plants. So the image you see here is kind of a top-down view of what the final site would look like. So you can really see the braided side channel that is significant for this project, the huge element of allowing habitat for the salmon in the area, but it also does a pretty good job of showing the habitat structures and the main channel that will be there. So carrying on, kind of where this whole conversation comes into play. So the project is partially complete, and in order to support the completion of the remaining work, the city was really fortunate to be awarded about $1.4 million of funding from the King County Flood Control District by way of their Cooperative Watershed Management Fund. The table you see on the screen is the funding we received to date for construction for this project. I'm not going to go through every single dollar figure there, or we'd be here all night. But I really want to illustrate that this project has received significant support, both on a local and state level, but especially from the Cooperative Watershed Management Fund. We've received almost $2 million from them in past years for this project. So this $1.4 million is really just kind of an extra added bonus of support that we've received from the Flood Control District. I do want to say this is a really unique grant in that it really doesn't require any match dollars. And it's nice because the funds will be made accessible to us as soon as we approve upon the agreement. So it's a very quick turnaround grant. It doesn't have match dollars. We're able to use it immediately and for a significant portion of the work. And our plan moving forward is actually to use these funds to complete phase 3 later this summer. And so moving on to the next slide, you'll see kind of the, I'm sorry, 2 more. Yeah, there we go. So earlier this year, the city actually bid for what we're calling Downey Phase 3. And I want to say that we've received some really excellent bids, and you will be seeing that at council next week. We're asking you to award that contract next week. But the funds for this grant that we're bringing before you now will be used to help pay for this project. And the work that is included in that, that phase of construction will include the excavation of another 25,000 cubic yards of material, the installation of 6 habitat structures, and we'll prepare the site to do some planting later this year. That planting will include the installation of about 10,000 native plants, and that work will be completed by city council, or sorry, excuse me, by city crews. We have city crews do a number of planting projects, and they always do a very excellent job. So we're excited for that. And in terms of the excavation, it's another 25,000. So it's about a quarter of what is really needed to complete the project. But this excavation is particularly important because it will actually bring us down to grade. So the image that you see on the screen where it's listed as side channel, we will actually be down to the level that it will be at its final completion, which is why we're allowed to begin installing some of the habitat structures and installing some of the plants. So in the near future, it will no longer look like a big hole in the ground. It will actually start to look a little bit more like a habitat project. So it's a pretty exciting step forward. And with that, on to the final slide. So the acceptance of these grant dollars will allow for the continued annual progress of this project. Every year since 2018, we've had at least one phase of work happening each year. So we've been able to continue work, and we've really done a good job of illustrating that the city is serious about this type of projects, and it illustrates our desire to continue this work towards other grants that we're pursuing. We are pursuing state grants known as the Puget Sound Acquisition Restoration Fund and the Floodplains by Design Fund, both of which are very highly competitive state grants. And the continued funding from grants such as Cooperative Watershed Management will really show that the city is interested in completing this and that the city is interested in doing this work. And finally, I just want to say thank you to council for your continued support. You've allowed me to continue pursuing these types of grants. You've also supported the city continuing this work itself, the construction. So I'd like to say I appreciate that support. And with that, that's everything I have.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Melissa. You don't have to thank us. You're doing a lot of hard work, and we appreciate what you're doing. Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. And Melissa, I would echo what the Council President just said. Good work over the years. It's not like it's an overnight kind of event or project. Can you tell me, or I don't know if you know this or not, how much money will you need to complete this particular project?
So I would say we're roughly halfway there. We're expecting
Okay.
it will likely need about $7 or $8 million total. And with this latest infusion, we're probably about halfway there. I
Okay.
will say that the remaining money we need is kind of for the fun work, I would say. A lot of the other work that was completed isn't as favorable to grant agencies. They don't necessarily like paying for a road relocation for a habitat project. But when you start talking about paying for plants and paying for habitat structures, there's a lot more interest on the state and local level.
Follow up?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Melissa, so with the monies that you've got available now, are we going to be able to see what I'm looking at in the right-hand side?
So what I would say is going to happen for this current phase is you see the main channel kind of running straight through the property.
Right.
Everything, we will be digging down to that main channel partially. We won't connect to the river yet. That's a future phase. But you will be able to see it dug down that far, and you'll be able to see plants between the existing roadway and that bottom channel. So it's a little bit narrower of a band, but in terms of plant numbers, it's going to be a significant portion of the total planting, about a third of the total plants.
So mostly lower type brush, not trees yet?
It will be a combination of the two. You will get brush and trees, but we do install trees when they're smaller. So it will still very much be lower to the ground. You'll be able to see straight through it.
Of course. Well, thank you very much. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Fincher. Oh, you had your hand up for a minute, but.
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, well, I'll go on and ask, will it look like an enlarged version of the Lieber property?
It's going to have a very similar look to the Lieber property. They're both kind of side channels in a way. I'd say more so the Lieber is more of a backwater element, but with the trees that are growing up at the Lieber property where it's very heavily vegetated, that will be very similar to what it looks like at the completion of this project.
Thank you.
Great. I just want to point out a couple things. You know, you showed that project funding slide, and it's really great. You see how important these partnerships are when it comes to funding these really big projects. Like you said, it's not something that cities can do on their own. And so we're very fortunate to have great relationships with these groups and to have our staff working really hard to help us navigate through these programs and be able to have money to be able to get this work done. I participated in a state salmon recovery briefing on Monday, and of course this Downey project was on their list, and got to brag a little bit about all the work that we're doing along the Green River. And you know, it's important to remember we're doing this because of flood control, but we're also incorporating all of the salmon habitat and restoration in all the projects we do. So these multi-benefit projects are really important, and we're setting a great example for other cities that are, you know, trying to do things like this, because we're doing such a great job here in Kent. So thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you to the staff that is always working on fighting for Kent for these grant programs and for this money, and all the work that we're doing to keep our community safe and to save the salmon. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on in the agenda, we are going to welcome Rob Brown. He's going to give us some information on the, oh, I'm sorry, let's back up really quickly. Are there any objections to moving that grant through to committee for authorization? I'm guessing nobody's going to oppose that at this point. So for the record, we'll go ahead and move that forward. And then Rob is going to give us some information on the Federal Way Link Extension parking restriction update. So welcome, Rob.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Welcome.
Hello? Oh,
Yes,
very
we
good.
can
Oh,
hear you.
thank you. Okay, sorry. Having some technical difficulties here. Good afternoon, Council President Troutner, Mayor Ralph, members of the City Council. My name is Rob Brown. I'm from the Public Works Department. I am the Transportation Engineering Manager. This afternoon, I'd like to talk to you about some proposed code revisions related to parking for the Federal Way Link extension. Before I get started, just a reminder, that's fine. In April, we talked about some parking restrictions in some of the neighborhoods around the city. I just wanted to give you a quick update that we're still working on those. They are in preliminary design to determine the number of signs that we need and the cost estimates for those. The ones that I would like to discuss this afternoon will be in addition to those when we bring those back to the council for action a little bit later. So again, this afternoon, I'm here to talk about potential parking restrictions on the West Hill related to Federal Way Link project. And while the link service is still approximately 4 years away, Sound Transit's contractor is moving right along in their design. In fact, they're getting pretty far along in most of the design. And if you choose to enact these parking restrictions now that are related to the link project, Sound Transit's contractor can include those as part of the construction project at no cost to the city. We don't need to do it now, we can do it later, but when we do the parking restrictions at a later date, we would have to have the city crews or city contractor install the signs. So with that, I have 3 locations I'd like to discuss with you. And after I present each one of those, I would be happy to discuss those and answer any questions, so we can go one at a time so that we don't have to save those all for the end. So the first location I'd like to talk about is the Midway area. So this is the Midway area. Just to orient you, north is to the right, Pacific Highway is at the top of the screen, and Kent Des Moines Road on the right side, Interstate 5 on the south. And then 30th Avenue runs north-south, but it's left to right in the center of your screen. Shown in light blue is the light rail extension. You can see, or the light rail alignments. You can see it runs off of I-5 over parallels 30th Avenue to the station and then goes back towards I-5. Part of this project will build 3 new streets. South 234th Street at the north, South 236th Street in the center, and South 238th Street at the south end. The project will also rebuild all of 30th Avenue South from South to 40th Street to Kent Des Moines Road. 236th Street will be the transit street between Pacific Highway and 30th Avenue. There will be transit stops on 236, and then on the east side of east of 30th to the end of the traffic circle there will be proposed layover space, and that street is also access to the Sound Transit parking garage. So all 4 of these new streets, or 3 new streets in the rebuilt street, will be built with either on-street parking or transit in mind. And one of the reasons we'd like to discuss this is that the light rail stations have been shown to spur redevelopment, and we're actually expecting significant redevelopment in this area after the light rail station opens. So for this area, what we're proposing is on 30th Avenue South, 234th Street and 238th Street, we're proposing something similar to what we have in the downtown area to provide some parking for local businesses and also for people to take short excursions on the light rail. We're proposing a 4-hour parking restriction between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. And that would be in effect Monday through Saturday, with the exceptions of Sundays and holidays. And this matches the timeframes we have in our downtown area for our 2-hour and 4-hour parking restrictions. The other thing this would do by not restricting the parking overnight, this would allow residents or people that are staying in the area for later night activities, would allow them a longer time to park. Again, similar to what we do in the downtown area. And again, as I mentioned, South 236th Street, transit only, but we are asking or proposing to have no parking in the traffic circle cul-de-sac there at the south end of 236th Street. That's shown in red. So just to go over the map real quick, 30th Avenue in the city code, existing city code is no parking from 240th to Kent Des Moines Road. The existing pieces of that we would like to keep, or proposing to keep, are shown in the purple dashed lines. The 4-hour parking restrictions, similar to downtown, are shown in the dark blue lines, and the transit-only areas are shown in the orange. And again, as I mentioned, we're also proposing no parking at the cul-de-sac there at the parking garage end. So with that, I would like to entertain any discussion or answer any questions.
All right, questions for Rob. Councilmember Boyce, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Rob, just want to make sure. So the proposed parking on the weekend, 4 hours, I'm assuming that's free, right? Not a charge for that?
Yes.
And we're doing the same.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And we're doing the same thing downtown today?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, these parking restrictions mimic what we have in the downtown area.
Okay. Then my other question, just overall, with the COVID-19 and so on, where are we at with Sound Transit? I'm assuming they're not on the original schedule. Do you have any idea on where we at for us without agreement schedule-wise?
I don't know for sure, and I will certainly find out and get back to you, but I believe they are either on schedule or very close to it. They didn't slow down at all. We're still having meetings. Mr. Peterson is still representing the city and doing a great job in keeping all of our city interests looked after, and they're still moving full speed ahead. But I will find out for sure and get back to you.
And there's no major stumbling block, as you know, we're moving forward, what you're saying, right? Pretty much.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Good presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
I was just ready for the next one.
Oh, Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. Rob, can you just remind me, what is that building on the east side of the no parking cul-de-sac? Is that a?
I believe that is a building, and I don't know off the top of my head what it is.
Okay, I think my only question would be if that's like a residential apartments or something, is that parking apply to them?
Madam Chair, Madam President?
Go ahead.
Councilmember Larmer, that is the old building that Sound Transit has bought. It's part of what used to be called the Park of the Pines, kind of a conference center, Christian conference center. It's kind of it's an odd shaped building, not residential.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Madam Mayor, do you have a question or comment?
Comment. Thank you, Madam President. Councilmember Boyce, so just a quick update. Rob, to my understanding, Rob is exactly correct. Sound Transit is really on time on our project. There was a short shutdown on some construction, but definitely back up and running. In fact, today they were doing demolition on the last building there along 30th. That needed to be taken down. So things are moving forward as planned.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Rob? All right. Thank you so much for that information.
Oh, I still got 2 more.
Oh, okay. Keep going.
Sorry. Right, so yeah, 3 locations. Second one, this is South 250 2nd Street. North is up. On the left side of the screen is Pacific Highway. On the right side of the screen is Interstate 5. And the big vacant area there in the upper half of the screen, that's the Midway landfill. So this is the first public street south of the Midway landfill. Again, as with the other one, the link light rail alignment is shown in the light blue, and there's a box next to that that says link emergency access. This is an emergency access point for the link station in case the fire needs access, or there needs to be some sort of evacuation, or there's some issue where people have to disembark the train and walk off, not at the station. So this is the access point between, this is the first one south of the station. So South 250 2nd Street is approximately 20 feet wide between 29th Avenue and the end of the street, which is where the access to that emergency location will be. 20 feet wide. The city code calls for a minimum of 20 feet of clear width for emergency access. That's actually part of the fire code and not part of the parking code. And since 252nd is the paved width is the same width as that, we are proposing no parking on both sides of the street. This is a residential area on the south side. North side is the Midway landfill. And there is some on-street parking, but to provide that emergency access from 29th Avenue, where the street narrows to 20 feet, to the link emergency access, we are proposing that to be 20 feet. Sorry, we are proposing that to be no parking because it is 20 feet. So, is there any questions or any discussion, please?
Rob, on that current street right there, you said that it's residential. Are we aware, have we reached out to residents to see who's utilizing that as parking right now, or?
We have not. So there's very little on-street parking on 252nd between 29th and 30th Avenue, but 30th Avenue to the end, there are a lot of old cars, there are a lot of abandoned looking cars, and older RVs and things parked on the north side of the street. We have received several complaints over the years about some of those vehicles that have been left in that location. So, but we have not actually reached out to the neighborhood yet.
Okay. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just, I know we're probably years out. I'm hoping someday we have some major development on that landfill. Will we be locked in a way that we can't make changes if there's a major development on that landfill, 3 to 5 years out someday?
Not as a result of this. If there is a redevelopment, they will have them redevelop that and at the north side of 252nd to whatever development standards the street classification call for. Depends on what it is. We can have them do on-street parking, and then we could come back to you and remove that parking restriction. The same way we can implement them through a code change, we can also remove them the same way.
Okay. Thanks, Rob.
Any other questions for Rob on this particular slide? All right, I don't see any hands raised, so we can go ahead and continue on.
Okay, last location. This is the location of the old Star Lake Park and Ride and the future Link Star Lake Link station. And the streets we're talking about tonight are 26th Avenue South, which is on the west side of the old Star Lake Park and Ride. That sort of wraps around to the east. South 270th Street, which is the east-west street, the north side of the Old Star Lake parking lot, and then 28th Avenue South that runs north of that to the end of the city street. The existing city code has no parking or parking restrictions on 26th Avenue South. Those are shown in the purple dashed lines. But from the signing, it appears that the intention was to make the entire street from South 272nd Street to the north end no parking, because it's all signed as no parking. And so this is more of a cleanup of getting that parking restriction into the city code, and then also having Sound Transit install those signs as they do their construction work on these streets. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions or have entertain discussions.
All right, any questions for Rob on this particular area? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So will this come back to council eventually?
Yes, ma'am. This will be part of those neighborhood parking restrictions that we will come back with all of them. We'll wrap these into the ones that we talked about in April as one package, and we can go through all of them again and make sure that everybody's comfortable with those as we go forward.
Perfect. Any other questions for Rob before we move on? All right, and that is your presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. Thank you, Kim.
All right, we're going to move on. I'd like to welcome Erik Preston to talk about the residential traffic calming program and give us an update.
Well, hello. Yes, this is Erik Preston, City Traffic Engineer. I'm here to give you a semi-annual update on the Residential Traffic Calming Program, or RTCP. The RTCP gives residents a formal process to bring their concerns about speed and cut-through traffic on residential streets to the attention of the city. And so, next slide, you'll see the new RTCP program, if you remember, was approved on June 2nd. Thank you very much, by ordinance and through the consent agenda. The new program is short and simple, much more so than the previous program, where a citizen can make a request, gather support from other residents. City conducts a traffic study, then a scoring evaluation. We get a pass, no pass decision. We count again if it passes. Then we hold a neighborhood meeting, decide what we want to do, and then it goes to a vote by mail. And if it passes that, it's built. And so it also considers other factors besides speed that affect neighborhood livability. And it's been getting a very favorable response from residents so far that I've had contact with. When they bring in their request, I'm able to send them this, the document explaining it, and they just really appreciate hearing back from us and appreciate that the city has updated it and that it's a very clear, comprehensive sort of process. The other thing that I found interesting is that there's quite a bit of hope in their voice, or you can just read it in their emails that they're sending. They just hope that their neighborhood will be better, the city will improve and be a better place to live. So next slide, I'll give you just a status update. Really, COVID-19 has had a huge impact, as you can imagine. We've seen a huge increase in the number of requests, with more people spending more time at home, taking walks in their neighborhood, and noticing the traffic and its speed a lot more than they used to. You might remember that February 29th was the state of emergency was declared. Then on March 12th, the schools were closed. March 16th, there was a ban on large gatherings. And March 25th was the stay home, stay healthy governor's order. And so you can see late February, early March, that's when those, and they're highlighted on your screen, when those requests really started to increase. And so we've had 25 requests in the first 6 months of 2020, which is a record for the RTCP. And we've already had more requests than we saw in all of 2019. And since I last gave you an update like this on March 24th, we've had 19 new requests since then in that 3.5 month period. So it's very popular and we're getting a very positive response. And we've already had 2 more so far in July. So it's a total of 27 so far this year. And so next slide, the program is in some ways on hold. And we've had abnormally low traffic volumes in the region that have not allowed us to conduct a traffic study since that March 12th school closure. And so traffic volumes in South King County have not dropped as far as other areas in the region, but they are still noticeably below last year. They do seem to be recovering faster than other areas, especially Highway 167. But the start of school will probably, in whatever form that takes, will probably give us the most normal conditions that we'll have in the near future to resume counting and collecting this data. That's such a requirement for the program. Social distancing requirements will also pose challenges to having traditional neighborhood meetings at schools and libraries, but we'll obviously comply with whatever standards and requirements are in place at the time. On the positive side, it does give us more time to reevaluate recent studies conducted just before the new program was adopted. And so on the next slide for the overview, since the March 24th update I gave you, there have been 19 new requests, but we have not been able to complete any studies because of the COVID-19 epidemic. And so we have 29 pending studies at the moment. So that's 29 neighborhoods waiting for us to collect traffic and speed data. We have been able to close 2 new requests under the new program, but we have quite a few that need evaluation. So 10 need reevaluation. That means maybe they previously qualified under the old program, phase 1, but for whatever reason, they stalled in the process, or those that recently had a traffic study in 2019, but didn't qualify under that old program. We also have 20 that are awaiting evaluation because while we were updating this program, we were continuing to collect studies as requests came in. We just never evaluated them because we didn't know what the final program would look like. We also have 2 that are under construction, and that's on your next slide for more details. We have Hazel Avenue North between James and Smith Street. That will get 3 speed cushions this summer. And then 98th Avenue South between 240th and 248th will have 4 speed cushions and 1 raised crosswalk in the middle. And so the plan is for that to be completed during the summer overlay, so coming soon. So the last slide is the updated RTCP map, which shows the location of requests that have been received since January of 2017. The brown are the projects that have been closed out already. The blue ones are ones awaiting a traffic study. So that's why there are so many of those. The green did not meet the speed threshold or show a significant cut through under the old program. The purple did meet the speed threshold or showed a significant cut through, and we're going to be proceeding with action and evaluation under the new program. So some locations have multiple associated requests, but overall, again, we have 29 locations awaiting speed studies. So got a lot of work cut out for me, but I'm excited to do that and to help the people of Kent. So I'm here to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for that update. Any questions or comments for Erik? All right, I don't see any hands raised. Like you said, you've got your work cut out for you. So I guess the next time we get a report on the projects, we'll hopefully see some that have been completed and resolved. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, next I'd like to welcome Michelle Wilmot. And Michelle, you've got somebody new to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Council President, Mayor Ralph, and members of the City Council. My name is Michelle Wilmot. I am with our Economic Development Department, and I also am staff liaison to Kent's Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. And at last month's June 18th meeting, the committee accepted a nomination and recommends to the council nomination of Sarah Davis to serve on Kent's Lodging Tax Committee. Sarah is the front office manager at Kent's Town Place Suites by Marriott. That's the hotel located at the north end of the valley up on 181st and 72nd Avenue. She comes highly recommended by the general manager there. His name is Ravi Sharma. He and I spoke at length about Sarah's qualifications and her service to the guests at that hotel. She is a Kent resident with a master's degree in business management and has been working in the travel and hotel industry since 2012. She received unanimous support by our Lodging Tax Committee members to join that committee. Just by the way of background, the state law governs the makeup of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee in that the committee membership should be equal among hoteliers and nonprofit members. In other words, it is equal representation by those who contribute to the lodging tax fund and those who are eligible to use those funds for the activities that we could spend lodging tax dollars on. Anyway, so with Sarah's appointment, should the council agree, that will round out our lodging tax committee, allowing us to have full representation and full membership on this committee after having a vacancy on the committee for the last year. So we would greatly appreciate your consideration and support for her nomination to join the committee. With that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Michelle. It sounds like she's a great choice. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Michelle? All right, if there are no objections, then we will move Sarah Davis forward to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for appointment at our next council meeting. So we'll move that to the consent calendar. Thank you,
Great.
Michelle.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And next, I'd like to welcome Michelle Ferguson. She's going to give us information on the May financial report. Welcome, Michelle.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Ferguson. I'm the Financial Planning Manager, and I will be presenting the May 2020 monthly financial reports. First off, we'll go into the general fund and talk about revenues. We have received nearly $45 million in revenues through May this year. Revenues through May of 2019 were slightly over $49 million, which is about a $4.5 million difference. Our revenues are primarily down in property tax, licenses and permits, intergovernmental revenue, charges for services, and miscellaneous revenues. The next two slides, I'll give you some more details on the revenue variances. So first off, you can see that the property tax right now is coming in at about 1.9 million less than in May of 2019. If you remember, King County extended the first half of the 2020 property tax deadline to June 1st, and that is causing this temporary variation. The month of June just closed, and I'm pleased to let you know that when you see the June report, the property tax revenues will be coming in much closer to budget. Sales tax is only about $20,000 under the May 2019 revenues. The revenues that we collected in May are reflective of the sales tax collected by businesses in March and are beginning to show the effects of COVID-19. So there's always that 2-month lag that we have between when sales tax are collected by businesses and when the city receives it. On the next slide, you'll see that utility tax is coming in just slightly above budget, so that's doing well. It's at $430,000 over the 2019 year-to-date revenues. B&O tax is coming in $670,000 over the 2019 year-to-date revenues. That's mostly going to be because of the increase to the square footage rates. Other revenues include licenses and permits, intergovernmental revenues, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, and miscellaneous revenues. Licenses and permits are down $550,000 from the same time last year. Intergovernmental revenues are down $1.1 million from the same time last year, but that is mostly due to the shifting of ST mitigation dollars to the Capital Resources Fund. Charges for services are also down a little over $1.5 million, which is a combination of charges for services from parks, ECD, and fire, as well as a small amount from court. Fines and forfeitures are only down $100,000 from the same time last year, so that one's doing okay. And miscellaneous revenues are down $700,000, which can be attributed to less coming in for interest income and senior center revenues and rentals. On the next slide, we'll take a look at general fund expenditures by department. And you can see that general fund expenditures are only $213,000 over what they were in 2019. This is less of a variance than there was between 2018 and 2019, which was over 2.3 million. I've highlighted again in purple the departments that have a negative variance from 2019, and this is due to the central cost allocation on how we divvy out some of those costs to all the different funds. With 5 months of the year complete, you would expect to see expenditures for the departments and overall to be about 42% of the budget, but you can see that only 2 departments are higher than that 42%, and those are IT and Public Works that are highlighted in green. And those are the 2 departments that are not really part of the general fund, but only because a small portion of the annexation gets charged to general fund. That's why they're there, and that those costs, those expenses will stop next month at the, well, technically at the end of June, and you'll see it on the next month's report. The last payments will be done then. And the non-departmental is highlighted in pink, and that was just because of the transfer out that we had to do for the B&O revenues from 2019. We had to do it in 2020. So it's not an extra cost, it's just shifting from one year to the other. And then the next slide, we'll talk about the year-to-year month comparisons. Good news is there's not a whole lot of funds that have a large variance right now. So it's just going to be a couple to point out. The capital resources so far is coming in higher than in 2019 and in 2020 for revenues. And this is due to revenues for sales tax, utility taxes, and investment income coming in slightly higher than expected. Also, the REIT revenues are coming in $350,000 higher than they were last year at this time. And then also the additional $890,000 in revenues for the SST mitigation that was shifted from general fund in years prior. There's also an additional $750 in revenues in the fund, and that was just because of a budget change that was done. So it's not really higher, it just has to show on the books that way. On the next slide, you will see central stores highlighted. All the other funds kind of have not too much variance going on. We already talked about golf last week, during the last report, how they got in their proceeds from the sale of their land. So central stores has a negative variance in revenues and expenditure, and this is due to departments reducing their discretionary spending, so they're not spending as much on office supplies and postage within the city. And the last one to talk about is going to be property insurance, and this one, there's nothing weird going on with it. There's just a variance from 2019 to 2020, and that's because in 2019, the city received a reimbursement and then also had the construction costs due to the damage that was done to the Lake Meridian bathrooms. But if you look at the 2018 compared to 2020, there is no variance. So just in case you were wondering what that extra tick up in 2019 was for. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Michelle. Any questions or comments for Michelle? All right, I don't see any hands raised. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the payment of bills, which we move those to the consent calendar. And up on the agenda, we have 2 items that will be presented by Christina Schuck. The first one will be an ordinance authorizing the fiber franchise agreement with ExteNet Systems. So welcome, Christina.
Good afternoon, Christina Schuck, Assistant City Attorney. So I'm going to combine my 2 items. Before you are 2 related franchises with the same company, ExteNet Systems. They deal with telecommunications for their fiber and small cell build out in the city of Kent. So ExteNet is a wireless infrastructure company, which means that they build, they maintain and operate the wireless networks, and then they lease it to the carriers that we are all familiar with. They have told the city that they represent all carriers, but their project in Kent, the particular one or their current one, is with Verizon Wireless. So for their network build out, they need 3 agreements. First, a fiber franchise. Second, a small cell franchise. That's for installation on PSA utility poles. And then also a small cell master license agreement for installation of small cells on city-owned infrastructure. That is approved administratively. You'll recall that in January, council adopted a master license agreement template that if an applicant decides to use it, it can be approved administratively. So that will not actually come before you, but they are planning to deploy on city-owned infrastructure. So before you, there is the fiber franchise. This is for a 10-year term. It contains terms that are targeted for the build out of a fiber optic network that's installed both aerially and underground. If there's existing infrastructure, they put the fiber on the existing lines. If it's in an underground area where utilities and telecommunications facilities are underground, then the fiber will go underground. There's also the small cell franchise. That is a 5-year term that is targeted with terms for installation of small cells on PSE utility poles. And these small cell facilities will be required to follow the design standards that are set forth in Chapter 16 in the Kent City Code. So with that in mind, I'll see if there are any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions for Christina on either of these? I know we've been talking about this quite a bit. Councilmember Fincher.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Christina, as far as the concealment elements for our poles, making sure that they're going to blend in, do we have those locked down pretty good that we can feel comfortable that they will actually look like the rest of the environment around? They're not going to look like, some obtrusive set of whatever, that it's going to actually look like we would want it to look, that they're not going to be able to come in and put up, I know we said just one, but they're not going to be able to add more onto it than the one unit, and that it's going to look like the rest of the area. It's not going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Well, the bad news is these are what they are. I mean, they do have cables and equipment. We did do a lot of work on our design standards in chapter 616 of the code to really try to address the aesthetic impacts. One piece of bad news is the FCC just implemented a new order on June 10th that does gives carriers more latitude for adding equipment that the city doesn't have a lot of authority to push back on. So yes, we worked really hard to get this framework in mind to achieve some of the goals, but we continue to lose a lot of control based on FCC action. And so once a facility is up, we have limited control over what they can keep adding to it, but we will keep looking as to our regulations, and we need to I was just at a webinar this afternoon on this new FCC ruling and have some ideas on how to exert as much control as possible. But it is limited.
Good, that's what brought up my questions, the latest ruling. So, okay, thank you. I'm glad that you're working on that.
Christina, are we aware of any other cities that have gone into an agreement with ExteNet, and if there's been any issues?
No, I haven't heard anything about anything good or bad. I know they are expanding in Washington, but no, I don't have any specific intelligence on what their build outs have looked like.
Okay.
I can check into that if you
okay.
back to you.
Any other comments or questions for Christina?
I will just let you know, excuse me, I was just going to say that per state law, you will see the fiber franchises or the fiber and small cell franchise twice in council. State law requires that you not adopt a franchise on the first time it's introduced. So this will be on the council agenda in the next 2 council meetings.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So this before us is to move an ordinance authorizing the fiber franchise agreement and then also an ordinance authorizing the small cell franchise agreement. So are there any objections to moving these forward to the consent calendar?
No.
All right, so I'm not seeing any objections or any hands raised from council. So it looks like we'll move those forward. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you.
All right, looking at the agenda, this brings us to the very end of our committee of the whole meeting. I want to thank everyone that was joined us today, and take care, everybody. We are adjourned.